Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today, I would like to address you in regards to a toss-back reply in regards to the pitched proposal coming from the great Senator of Vermont, Bernie Sanders. He just posted something on YouTube in regards to his intent to put forth a resolution in the Senate to require a moratorium on AI data centers in order to slow down the progress of this very transformational technology that is poised to completely revolutionize our society, our way of life, our world paradigm, everything. And I very much respect his enthusiasm and his great care and his concern in regards to this. But I would like to take the approach of, I think there is a way for us to do what he said he wanted, is to make sure that this technology benefits everybody. And stopping this technology is not going to prevent it from happening. And it's not going to give us time to make it, to do it right. There are still going to be bad actors with nefarious intent in other countries that are going to continue to develop this technology and innovation, whether we choose to hold ourselves back or not. We have to face that reality. It's true. Which I'm sure that's the reasoning why these people have, targeted Senator Sanders, in regards to calling him out, saying, he's anti-innovation or something like that. I don't think he's anti-innovation. I think that he's cautious and he's caring and he matters. It matters to him how humanity in America is going to be, and Americans are going to be impacted by this technology. But what I see in this is an opportunity to, instead of taking an approach that tries to control and contain and conform and try to create like a controlled chaos type scenario from which people can develop, progress but in such a way that's kind of like holding it back. I think that we have to look at this kind of like an airplane that's flying through the air, and it just needs, or a ship that, is trying to sail through the water, it needs a rudder, it needs direction, it needs purpose. And right now, many of these AI companies are directionless. They just want to like make the next thing do the thing that, proves that their thing is better than the other person's thing. And there's really no like general guidance as to like what we would even want something so tremendously profound to be able to do on our behalf. It's not just about like who can, make this great thing fastest, but rather like who can make this thing do the most tremendous impact of good for humanity overall. Because that's where we want to focus our energy. That's where we want to invest, strategically. That's what we want to help to build up scaffolding for. That's where we want to, champion for the success of these companies, where we want the, American people to rally behind this. And in order to do that, we need to stop looking at it as if this is a thing that is, an enemy to like protect ourselves against, and rather this opportunity for us to engage with a new way of orienting ourselves in the world that is in complementary with technology. I have always viewed, I am not an AI expert by any measure of the imagination. Artificial intelligence to me is an artifice of intelligence. It's like an artisanal approach to things. It's this externalization of a thing that helps us to evolve into a super organism of, the best version of humanity. I've always believed in this cyber symbiotic relationship between artificial intelligence and human intelligence to help us to actualize our best version. Unfortunately, a lot of these people who are developing AI are not interested in that sort of approach. And they are very much, if they are trying to improve human capabilities, many times it's more like how to give a domineering advantage for those who are able to afford and access this technology, that will assure that others will be left behind, and the winner takes all kind of situation. These are obviously not good outcomes either. So for me, it's like if we give a proper intended use for technological advancement and we orient our development of AI within the parameters of that, and then we tap on, like a rudder of sorts, a way to guide that direction within the limits and the bounds of a reasonable development, we are more likely to achieve, across the board, what's in the best interest of all parties involved. We don't want to hold back our capacity to develop an innovation that could help us to make transformative leaps and bounds. But we also don't want to leave people behind. Much like he spoke of, the Industrial Revolution was revolutionary, and AI is going to be, impactful tenfold, probably even more so than that. And so we have to understand, if you look at the Industrial Revolution, a lot of the artisans and the makers, the people that are doing the handiwork were displaced from their jobs because machines were able to master their crafts, and to do so in such a way where it was, faster, better, cheaper, more consistent. It didn't have the human touch, but it enabled us to optimize efficiencies that could then be captured in a form of a new type of value that we could not access from individuals making, limited handicrafts. And so, it gave us the advantage of having surplus, which helped to draw prices down because it made it more accessible to people in terms of, affordability. And then, as more people demanded it, the companies were able to generate more business and then turn more profits. And even as they would increase profits over time in order to pay for the expansion of their growth of their business, so they can offer more goods and services to other people, that slow increase of price was able to distribute across a larger base of people, and so the price was able to keep down low. Now, something in the similar effect with the development of AI being a universal basic innovation that improves the lives of Americans is really, I think, the best orientation that we need to take. Instead of, conflicting, or even in the sense of like competitive. Yes, competitive in terms of, free and fair market systems where we want people to like bring your best, so that we can find best practices and these sorts of things. But also free, fair, competitive in terms is like not only the richest people are able to make AI and to benefit from AI, that it should be something that everybody benefits from. And I think that the best way to do that, where we can kind of put a governing, moderating force for the development of AI while making sure that this is going to be a benefit for, Americans across the board and humanity as a totality, is to establish what I have been like working on in terms of defining a way to, kind of bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots in society, which this AI, controversy represents, another massive chasm that's going to be created in society, that is going to be, so much more difficult for us to be able to ascend out of, especially if all the powers can concentrate into the hands of a few. How will we ever be able to capitalize off of a new orientation of economics that is wholly focused on these artificial intelligence systems and robotic systems producing most of the value? How will we ever have a consumer producer, base? And so with the alignments of the economics automatically shifting into that direction to the point where most of our competitive, business investments are billions of dollars are being poured into, AI developments right now. A lot of them in like, schemes that probably will have no success. Other ones that are like people that are hard pressing to get a certain type of AI out there. And the competitiveness of is just like who has the capacity to build out as fast, buy as many chips as possible, build as many data centers as possible. And in the meantime, we're having consequences of, AI data centers eating up the, freshwater reserves in the localities where they build, and it's depleting the natural resources for the people in those areas, driving up the cost of living because you're bringing in these experts from external places to be able to help run the show, not training the people, in the locality to level up to be of service. So it's not really producing localized jobs. It's driving up the cost of living in these places. So rent is higher, food is higher, gas is higher, everything's higher. And then you're bringing in revenues that are helping to, build out and develop things within the community that maybe they didn't have before, but tremendous hordes of people are being left on the side of the road. And so the advancement and the benefit is disproportional. And then what does help everybody, like the, paving of roads and the establishment of sidewalks and these sorts of things that didn't happen before because there wasn't tax funding in those localities. The fact that the cost of living is so high, many of the people that lived there that could have benefited from those sorts of things, had they had the funding to get it done before, now have to move and aren't going to be able to benefit for those things anyway. And so it's just like replacing, the people that lived there and made it their homes with these new people that have, decided to go there because that's where the work is and they know how to do that particular work. So you have these sorts of like disproportionate, investments and advancements, and the whole factor is that as it progresses, whole populations of people are being left behind. And from what I hear, from what Bernie has always said in regards to this front, is not just the economic damage and the risk threat that it comes where humans are no longer able to distinguish between what is reality, and that AI like distorts and perverts our reality and detaches us from one another, and all of these negative sociological impacts that are there. And then the economic impacts is like people won't have work, so how are they going to make a living? And then like why would you take away one of the things that is most defining for our distinguishment of self-determination, which is our capacity to do good work and to attain fruits of our own labor and to take pride in the prestige of, doing, a job well done. These sorts of things are all deeply concerning, but you need to look at it in terms of, in order to, you're not going to stop this technology, but you can stop how it's negatively impacting the people who are being left behind or kept behind. Because as companies and large investors are putting money into AI, there's less money available for people who have, conceptual, innovative ideas that would really help to improve the human situation, the American situation, but they can't get funding to do those things because it's not AI oriented. And so then you get a bunch of people trying to make businesses that are oriented around AI that just doesn't make sense. And then you realize that it's really taking away from our talents and our skills and our abilities. There's people that are in school right now that are going to get out of school and they're not going to have a job, that what they go to school for is going to be an obsolete form of career making because of the, trajectory of AI taking us away from even needing that sort of, professional role in society. And so what I think is the best approach is to establish a connection with an equilibrium tax. It doesn't stop, but it stays. It stays within reasonable bounds and assures that as AI advances, yes, advance, but you are limited within the scope by which you are able to bring the rest of us with you. If you can't bring us with you within a reasonable moderation, to which that chasm isn't uncontrollable or insurmountable chasm, then you can't go any farther. And that we have a hard limit that says, you have overextended your capacity for growth and expansion because we've reached a hard limit where you have gotten too far out of hand in terms of the difference between the upper limit of the upper echelon of society and the lowest limit of the criterion echelon that says like the standard is set, we can't go below this because it's either we all go together or we're not going to make it, and to make sure that the disproportional, benefits always, defaulting to the people who already have capital assets and resources, you establish within that the necessity for a portions tax, which says that as you are gaining benefits from the fact that, you don't have to pay an employee because you can automate that role out, the more that you are able to value, gain off of automation, you will have to pay a higher portion of tax that you can choose to distribute a portion of that tax towards certain social, projects that are intent on helping us to take new initiatives and new opportunities for humans to find good work that they can do that is in positive contribution to us, making sure we're staying within the moderation and making sure the opportunities are always advancing us so that, the expansion of AI is moving everybody together. There's going to be lots of work that needs to be done in there. We need to have supportive roles to make that happen. And so if these corporations are like, strategically, it's in our best interest to not fall out of the parameters of expansion where a higher tax rate is going to knock down any benefits of gains that we get, and so we're going to be doing a lot of work for a lot less of benefit that we could gain if we just took a portion of that benefit, added it into a pooling of making sure that we are funding those things, which makes sure nobody gets left behind in our growth and development process. And companies can direct it towards the programs that they see. Well, we really need to have people that are able to make advances in achieving these project initiatives in this way. So we're going to fund those types of programs in these areas where we see this innovation can develop out. We need to find innovative solutions to it. We're going to bring people on board to be participants and contributors to that by just pooling in the resource access for people to tap into. And so they're generating a pooling of the resources from which a new form of economy can develop out of a sense of like, how do we take this amazing abundance that we're creating and redistribute it in such a way that is in mutual interest, mutual benefits, mutual securities for everyone. Because again, it goes into the thing of like, for the few people that would be benefiting from AI, if it's leaving everybody else behind, the rest of society is going to start to disintegrate, and we're going to have, massive fallout in that in terms of civil unrest and social disorder and social deviance and hooliganism and, more war, more crime, more violence, these sorts of things as a natural resort, because idle hands are going to, if you have time to kill, that may just be the end result. And so you're going to create this like terrible situation because your innovation is advancing us in this ways. And you're not concerned about these social matters. You're hard focused on your technology, right? That's what you're good at. That's your talent, but there are enough people in the world that see, yeah, you can do that, but we still have a lot of people we have to take care of, and there's still a lot of things that we have to like support, because, if people see you as a threat and you're the cause for this, they're going to come after you. Or if they see you as somebody who's being selfish and hoarding resources and they're getting less and less as you're getting more and more, there's going to be a grievance that's there that people are going to respond to once they hit harder and harder limits of desperation. So you either shore up the weakness of the fact that you're going to have hordes of people that you're pissing off, who left to their own devices in a world full of chaos and, no order and, like disadvantage for the capacity for other people to exploit them. There's going to be a breaking point, and it's not going to be a good outcome. So solve for that by just doing right by people. Like, you have benefited, all these AI people, all these very rich people have benefited from the social sanctity of our society, our domestic order. They have benefited from our roads and our schools, and have benefited from our capacity to pool resources, our strengthening of resource channels and chains, our capacity to have diplomacy with other nations so you can even do business in those other nations, our capacity to create the, context by which they can achieve globalization with their companies, pull in resources, pull, intelligent people from other places and to do the work and things like that. They benefit from America's capacity to foster an environment in which innovators can, strive, succeed and achieve. And so there is a just due return on investment that they should be giving back to society to help to level everybody else up, because there are many more innovations to come. Like, this isn't the end of it. There's so much more to come, and we have to emphasize that with a sense of like, if we take our capacity to make these gains and advantages in, this technological advanced way through, reinforcing a paradigm in which we can be mutually, reliant on AI and fostering good outcomes for everybody as a result of taking on that advancement, allowing for it, we create the situational context where people can take risks for higher things. And so, bless Bernie for always saying, he's worried about, what are these people going to do when they don't have jobs? And I totally respect that. But I also understand where many of these tech, oligarchs have come from, and their sense of like, well, there will be other things for people to do. And, You know, what I see is what they could do to help us to level up together. But in order for that to achieve, we need to create these moderating influences that make sure that this is something that's beneficial for everyone. You know, the other form of taxation that could help to, you know, get a control over this in such a way that is more about, you know, keeping it reined in so that things don't get out of hand, but also making sure that it's bound. We are, you know, eternally bound to one another in terms of your success is my success. You know, America works for everyone. It doesn't disadvantage anybody. Nobody's getting left behind, you know, and everybody has, you know, everything they need to be able to live a good life. Why? Well, because we're investing in making that happen. And, you know, our technological advancement makes that possible for us, but only if we do it right. And you're certainly not going to get those outcomes if you have politicians that have no sensibilities about the risks, the threats, the dangers, or the opportunities that, if steered, directed, and guided in the right direction, can do right by everyone. You know, and I don't think it would be very far off in, you know, challenge to convince many of these, you know, AI innovators to be willing to, you know, take on that type of relationship with, you know, the greater society in terms of, like, you know, mutual respects, mutual interests, mutual securities. If they were put in that position where your options are very clear, you are either with us or you are working against your best interests, because you're not going to get very far, because we have determined that there is a proper intended use for our technology. There's a proper intended use for our technological development. There's proper intended use for our economics. There's a proper intended use for the types of policies that we create, because we're ensuring that we're showing up our weaknesses, nobody's getting left behind, you know, and we're doing this in a mutual respect, mutual interest, mutual benefits, mutual security sort of way. And the only way to achieve that is if we make sure that everybody, you know, this is benefiting everybody in some way. And we can do that by putting on these, you know, forms of taxation that help to create that moderating balance, an equilibrium tax that makes sure that the high limit and the low limit of society are within reasonable bounds. And, you know, if people want to make an advance, they have to advance everybody else, you know, so we understand how progress is accomplished. And then what do we do to make progress? Well, then you invest in portions tax. It says we're going to invest a portion of our funding to get these certain projects done, these certain initiative projects done. We're going to put people to task to do the good work to make that accomplished, because while they may not need to be the person that goes works in the AI warehouse, you know, helping flip out orders for people day in and day out, they have talents, they have skills, they have capabilities, they have want for a better world. And it's like, bring your good talents, you know, and skills to service to bear in these ways that we need to. And they're pulling of resources, so there's ways for people to tap into this to get the, you know, resources they need to fund to accomplish the projects and to be able to turn a profit on it so they can make a good living, you know, commensurate with what they put out, you know, they get, you know, a fair compensation for it. And so we can create that system where it's not just you know, about how hard it is to make a company nowadays, how hard it is to get investors to turn away from AI. AI is not the only thing that we need to get done, guys. You know, there's so many things that are getting left behind or ignored. This is a way to focus attention to say, these are the things that we have to accomplish to make sure that we maintain equilibrium, you know? And so the equilibrium tax helps to fund to make sure that we are always reinforcing the back end to make sure that our advancement is within reasonableness so things don't break apart and lead to dissolution. And we invest with intent towards these certain, you know, portions of projects that can get things done to help us to build the blocks by which the people, through self-actualization and self-determination, can ascend themselves, you know, because this isn't about charity, it's about sovereignty. We're all in this together. You know, and the people will make those advances. If they see opportunities, man, they will take advantage of it, you know, and not in an exploitive, you know, dog eat dog, mighty crush the weak, free for all hellscape sort of way, but just like, you know, my success is your success. I'm going to make this advantage in this way because, man, it's going to open doors of opportunity for everybody else. I am blazing a trail and I'm leaving a path so other people can follow, and we're all going to make it out of this, you know, whatever predicament we might be in. We're going to ascend and transcend that into a better, you know, situation. And we're going to take on challenges within reason, and we're going to make sure that, you know, we have solutions that we give ourselves to, you know, take care of no matter what may come, a way to resolve solve for those problems as they arise. And so we become malleable, adaptable, mobile, efficient as a society, and we're able to sustain a constancy of reasonableness of how do we make sure everybody's living the good life. And then you have a stewardship tax which everybody pays. It's kind of like a membership fee, and you pay into that. So we have a pooling of resources that's a resource commons that everybody can extract from the type of innovative, solutions that they need to help to level up their lives. It's kind of like you pay into it, and then you can extract out the type of value that you need. And when you have that pooling effect, you can kind of have the Costco effect where it's in bulk. You can have in bulk opportunities for childcare, in bulk opportunities for healthcare, in bulk opportunities for, access to, entrepreneurship, support services, these sorts of things. So that not everybody's going to need every kind of resource that's available, but everybody has access to the resources that they need when they need it. And it's all about building up a scaffolding for their lives so they can take risks for higher things and focus on taking care of the, projects that we need to get done that helps us level up to the point where, nobody's going to fall behind this baseline standard of society that says this is the good life. Now, what else can you bring to the table now that you know that your survival is secured? Because we're all securing that survival for everybody across the board. AI has the opportunity to do that. And I think that if you are tying in this necessary taxation of this type of technology in order to hold us together, with an equilibrium, state with one another, proportionally investing in those things which will help us make the greatest advancements, and then give everybody the opportunity to be a part of that process of advancing us together, and then giving everybody a back-end scaffolding to make sure they're not getting left behind, but they always have the means to, sustain a state of living the good life and able to take risks for higher things by taking part as a prospect to build up their lives to higher levels of advancement and achievement, as well as helping everybody else to succeed along with them. And so I would rather take that type of approach to AI than to halt all, out approaches or whatever. I think another necessary and important, it would be temporary, because I don't foresee it being necessary for an extended period of time, especially if we're able to do the good, hard, and necessary work to shore up our weaknesses of our energy system. But if we are able to create a short-term moderating tax on energy use in the form of those who are the highest users of energy, which right now are data centers, and then data miners and these sorts of things, if we shift our energy infrastructure to make them pay for all energy, and then to create a opportunity for the cost of energy for, domestic uses to be free energy for all domestic uses, within reason of, don't waste energy, be efficient, what is reasonable for your household and these sorts of things, and then promoting energy efficient, up leveling of housing and, appliances and these sorts of things to draw that down as much as possible, which is another part of the portions tax. Let's build up those innovations so we can shore up, the waste of our energy system. So that ends up being less that the people who are the payers for it have to end up paying in the long run, not by stifling or stipending people's energy use, but promoting comfortable conservation. Especially through innovative advancements that help us to, lessen our demand for use for energy. But, immediately drawing down the cost of living for residents to be able to have energy for free without having to pay for it, then gives us an automatic, immediate incentive for us to be okay with the fact that we are technologically advancing in these crazy ways that are probably going to set us back in some other ways. At least for now, it's a buy-in to say, let's look at this in a positive direction. This can be a mutual benefit thing. Here's one way that we can mutually benefit. And then these larger corporations are going to have to then be moderated by the fact that, well, now we're on the hook for all our energy and everybody else's energy too. So we're not going to be able to, get out of hand with what we do. We're going to have to be intelligent, reasonable, smart about how we, use the energy that we do use, and then make sure that we are investing into those projects that are going to help to reduce the overall energy use of the United States, because the efficiency of that system is very much tied in with our capacity to be able to profit from what we are using, because we're on the hook for the total bill. And I think that would be a much better way to moderate the influence of the development of AI into our society and our way of life, because it's tying into something that is tangible, it's realistic, it's tied to something that everybody is connected to, which is, the energy unit. And then making it so that these people who are, using the most energy in these AI data centers and whatnot are using it responsibly, and then making sure they're investing in, they may not be able to, because of, the ascending, gradients of, the use of energy for AI is just going to continuously grow. Like, creating efficiency in the system is hard if you don't have a proper intended use. Until AI has a proper intended use, it's really hard to make efficiencies in the systems of how the energy is used. That's another reason why establishing, a stewardship, orientation of welfare and stewardship in society, a proper intended use for AI to help us to achieve the ends of welfare and stewardship. It gives them a proper intended use to orient around and helps them to be able to establish that efficiencies in the systems that they very much need so that things don't get out of hand. But then also on the other end of that, which is part of welfare and stewardship, making sure nobody gets left behind, everybody lives the good life, is to invest in those projects, those proposals, those innovations, those services that the rest of the economy can tap into. Now that we're not going to be, working in the warehouses or whatever, there's still work to be done. Still work that we have to do to level everybody's life up. Invest into the economy in such a way where people can tap into that and start doing the good work to help shore up the back end of it, of like, creating the efficiencies in the energy systems of the domestic side of things, so that the companies are bearing less of a burden in terms of the overall use of energy. I liken it very similar to how China has been able to accomplish so much abundance in their energy use. I mean, it is a very high energy intensive nation. That there's so much inefficiencies in the systems that there are actually AI data miners that are able to tap into the inefficiencies of the systems and still be able to do their work, and it's like, it's nothing to them. And so thinking of that in a sense of being able to make the systems itself, where the residential factor of consumer use for energy is a nothing factor, and to be able to create such a system where we can knock off one of the, cost of living bills for people is something we could do today that would revolutionize their lives. It would lead them in a better direction. It would help them to be more, look more positively towards this type of innovation. And then the AI developers themselves can start doing the good work to say, listen, guys, we don't want to be looked at as the bad guys or the evil guys. We're not the enemies, We're not an opposing force that is trying to ruin your life and make everything terrible. Like, we don't want those negative outcome consequences. They're obviously thinking about this. Bernie even listed all of this stuff that these people are like, yeah, guys, we're worried. We know this is incredible. It's going to do all these things, but damn, there's so much consequence to this. And like, we don't have the capacity to focus on getting those things done. But, we're putting out the warning sign to everybody. This is going to happen. Somebody figure it out. They're not able to do it, but what they can do is they're benefiting greatly from the advancements of this technology. They can give us, the, back end support for us to be able to solve for those things that they can't. They are just not, it's not in their wheelhouse. It's not within their capacity. It's not within their care or area of concern. It's not that they want bad things to happen, but they are going to happen, and we have to do something to solve for that. The other thing that I want to touch on before I finish this video, so it doesn't get too long, the comment that Bernie had said that Mr. Ellison had mentioned about there being an AI surveillance state in which there will be so many cameras and so much audio capturing and, so much eyes on what humans are doing, that it will change the behaviors of people, and then we will have more, people behaving better. And as scary as that sounds, especially in the way that Bernie put it, nobody wants a surveillance state. That's freaking terrifying. Especially if it's being ran by some, unregulated, corporation that can then sell that information willy-nilly off to the government, who is just hungry for, all of this information that they can use in the case of like a president, pandemonium like Trump is doing, where he could use that to target individuals to be able to, cause harm to their lives, to make their lives impossibly difficult, or, to like target people. Like, I'm not okay with those outcomes at all. But let me just say this, in the, conversations that Bernie has had before, especially in regards to what happened in Minnesota, in terms of, Renee Good and Alex Preddy being, shot execution style in broad daylight in the middle of the street by a masked armed government agent, if not for the surveilling effect of everyday average citizens having their phones to be able to make a recording of those events, we would not have known what really happened. And we wouldn't be able to stand by with confidence to say that that was wrong, And with the way people post stuff on social media all the time, I mean, even me making this video right now, this is a form of self-surveillance. We self-express constantly, and we're constantly putting ourselves under, surveillance. You go to a store, most places are surveilled now, to deter people from, doing something wrong. And let's look at the concept of the Guthrie case, where if we didn't have this, chime or ring or whatever, video camera at her front door, we wouldn't have not known, any insights in terms of like who, the, prospective abductor of this woman was. Like, if we didn't have that type of surveillance. And unfortunately, we do live in a society that has created the context by which some people left to their own devices do not know right from wrong, and they will cause harm. And so having surveillance helps us to identify threats of harm. It helps us to gather more insights and information about something that we may not have been personally there to observe. It helps us to better understand, what's happening when eyes aren't on. And we already self-divulge all the time. People make content with their phones and their cameras all of the time. And so the sense that this is some sort of like nefarious, sinister like thing, I get it, especially with the whole planter thing. Like, I'm totally against their approach to, total surveillance. I'm against that, because I do believe that the people who are making that approach are bad actors with nefarious intent, who actually want to do harm to certain subjects of the population, subsets of the population. And using technology in those sorts of ways I'm not okay with those outcomes. But that's where, especially with AI and things like that, we can curb those technologies from being able to be used in these nefarious ways by agreeing that the terms and conditions of your capacity to be able to provide these technologies mean that you have to commit to your technologies not to be used for bad and nefarious purposes. And that there has to be created an established permission structure by which people's digital presence and their own personal identity is tied in with their own personal dominion, to the point where if somebody uses your likeness, that they have to pay you to access that sort of thing. This creates all kinds of structures by which consequences for exploiters can be reaffirmed through laws that helps to keep people protected from, people using technology nefariously against, to harming innocents or exploiting innocents or something to the effect. But let's not create this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty and doubt. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, I used to hang out with some people that were like these crazy hippies that were worried about, man, surveillance state, and the government's going to come after you and, stick it to the man sort of thing. And it's like, never really made sense to me. It's like, well, wouldn't you want to have a situation in which if you needed protection, there would be help that you could call for? It's very much like I remember when I was in college, where we had these, strategically placed phone booths with lighting and camera surveillance throughout the campus, and they were safety phone call centers. And they were prevalent throughout the entire campus. And it's actually, if there was more of that, it could have prevented, there was a crime that occurred on the campus years before I had even gotten there, in which a young student was preyed upon by a security guard working at the campus, and he murdered her on the campus and got away with it for, a time period or whatever. Eventually, it was resolved, but, the misplaced trust in this person that was supposed to be a security officer, this young lady was then violated by him, and her life was taken from her. Had there been a call center post with the surveillance camera in the area that she was taken to and murdered, perhaps there would have been a swifter resolution. Perhaps that individual would not have gone through with harming her, because he would have been consciously aware, because he's a security guard, that he is under surveillance. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with if he would have had a body cam. Just same thing if we consider ICE. Like, they act a lot differently when they have a body cam on. I was just listening to one of my favorite comedy shows Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, where he, coming back for the 13th season, did a whole segment about police body cams. And, it's crazy to think how they do behave differently when they know that they're being observed. And so for us to try to suggest that, it's like this nefarious thing in a sinister state and all of these things, you have to understand there's good, bad, and ugly with every technology. And we have to just find a way to, resolve out laws that prevent the most extreme usages that would be the most exploiting and most harmful and most deviant from, the ideals of civil society and the ideas of privacy and protection. But at the same time, let's not discount the value that's there of how lives can be protected, property can be protected. We can get information to help us to solve crimes that we otherwise would not have been able to have if we didn't have this connected resource of being able to see what's happening and all eyes on, Let's look at it as it's looking out for our best interest. It's like, I got your back, you got my back sort of thing, instead of looking as a nefarious thing. Are there bad actors with nefarious intent that want to use this so that they can racially profile people and, intimidate people in terms of like blackmailing, is like, oh, well, look what I've seen, or to extract, personal things from people and to be able to, sell off the, data information of somebody's phone being hijacked and their camera being hijacked, and then personal information in personal videos are displayed in parts of the deep dark web. Those are all bad things, and we don't want that kind of stuff to happen, but we can create laws that can help prevent those sorts of things, and then and Congress has to be open to the realities of that and listen to the constituents that say, this is a real threat, this has happened to me, and it's a real thing, and we need to solve for it. And then Congress work with the people who are relevant stakeholders this is impacted, to be able to find the right types of framework of legitimate legislation that can help us to solve for the worst potentials for this sort of thing in society existing to do harm. And then optimize and incentivize for it to be used in such a way that really does do good things for us. There's more than one side to all of this, and we have to really look at it in a dynamic way. In conclusion, I don't agree with Bernie in his desire to create a moratorium on data centers. I understand the logics. I understand that might actually be the only thing that we can advance right now, because it's the only thing that Congress, in their limited scope of understanding of the situation, might be able to get behind and say, okay, we don't know what to do, but that's something we can do, and it's something that we can do now, and it could be argued as reasonable. I get it. And so, I wish him the best of luck to achieve success in that front. I don't foresee that he's going to get a lot of enthusiastic backers to do that, because people in Congress have no idea what they're doing. Bernie has taken the time to care, to learn, to know, and he doesn't even know everything. And so it's reasonable that he's advancing this. But for him to be able to compel his fellow Congress members to vote with him in favor is not likely, because these people are not willing to listen to reason about it, especially if they're getting paid by, the AI people that are like, special interest groups coming and saying, I'm lobbying you, say no to this. So one good voice trying to lead youth in the future in a positive direction against all these competing forces of people that are like, I have enough money to throw at the problem to make it go away, or to at least prevent it from advancing anything that might stop us from doing what we want to accomplish. So that's where he's competing with this, where if you take a different approach that says we're going to prove that the whole point of the exercise is to make sure you're not leaving us behind. Make your advancements great, wonderful, because there's so much good that AI can do, so much good. But damn, put in the wrong hands or put to the improper use, it can do some real damage. And the unintended consequences of just runaway technology, that doesn't have any tie back of value into society, with intention, is going to leave hordes of people behind. And it's going to be a real bad thing with a lot of cascading consequences that are going to be uncontrollable. And it's going to create the perfect disaster storm scenario for a lot of really, really bad things to happen. That ultimately is going to put everything that we're working towards at risk and in jeopardy. So I think it's more reasonable to come forth and say, like, hey, there's a way to do this the right way. And the right way would be to make sure we're all in this together. Nobody gets left behind. Nobody's put at a disadvantage. Nobody's going to be kept behind. We're all advancing together. And the point is to make a good life out of all of this. Like, wow, but human ingenuity is the most abundant resource on the planet. I don't want to stifle its capacity to be able to find these new amazing ways for us to, look where we come from. I was just having this great conversation with this lady the other day about Steve Jobs and like how he struggled in school and was just trying to learn to make his way because he knew he wanted to do something amazing with the world. And he had so much potential. He was just a brilliant mind. And then finally, like, it dawned on him, like, I could do this thing, and he took his talents and his skills, his eye for coordination and beauty and simplicity, in exquisite, way to execute on something that empowers people with a capacity they didn't have before, and to do so in such a compelling way, and he was just a mind that, if you knew him at the time before he became successful, you never would have imagined that he had that in him, but not held back by, what society tried to say that he could be or, would be or could afford to be. He went out and challenged those notions of this is what was possible, and he advanced us in such phenomenal ways. I am not an Apple person. I do not like Apple products, but I absolutely love Steve Jobs. He is one of the best moderating influences of my life. And so to imagine this beautiful mind of human ingenuity was able to advance us in these ways to the point where, we have so much to thank from him doing all that he did in expertise, to take us into these technological advancements to the point where I even have a cell phone right now capable of doing all these things to the point I can point and shoot a camera and then send it on its way to be accessible to many different people on these digital platforms of digital connectivity across the screen of distance. It's brilliant, it's fascinating, it's amazing, I would not have wanted somebody to come up to Steve Jobs and Apple in their early days to say, what you're doing is going to be disruptive to a flip phone, and we just can't have that. Or, like all the people that are working in the telecoms in the, answering service where, the ladies are plugging in the phone lines into the wall and, like answering centers and things like that. Like, you're going to put all those people out of business, so we need to prevent you from being able to make this technology. Like, what? Did it disrupt the system? Did, certain businesses that weren't able to find the right type of pivot for innovation, did they fail and they fall and they cease to exist? Yeah. Did other companies find a way to pivot and moved in the direction of where they saw technology was taking us, and then try to predict where it could possibly go from there to try to advance new technologies? And then that compelled us to make higher and higher advancements of technology to the point where we're like, how do you, network information in an external space where people can go and access it without having to be in the immediate space, to get a file piece of paper, but they could pull a file from, this vastness of nothing space, but just connected with nodes that are channeled through certain, address points, but somebody can, tap into with certain coding and say, I can extract information from there. How can we expand upon that in such a way where we connect people across vast different distances to be able to communicate in real time? Oh, well, we need to have a camera technology, microphone technology. We need to have faster computing processes. We need to be able to make it into a micro-sized technology. We need chips that are smarter and faster, higher processing power, that don't get overheated so it doesn't melt the phone. Like, we have to think of all these things, and all these brilliant minds came together to make it work, to the point where now we have this potential from, what is the internet, to what's the capacity to interrelate all the vastness of the internet and everything that's incoming constantly to the internet, and put that into such a way that is this informed, systematic, artisanal approach to take knowledge, like data and information and knowledge, and put it together in a cohesive way that establishes wisdom that people can reap and then use with intent to help us accomplish great things. The advancements in the medical field because of AI is tremendous. The fact that we will have the capacity to be able to detect cancers in ways that, like, human capacity alone could not do without this help of this innovative, technology assisting us to be able to see in ways, and understand in ways, and measure in ways we never had before. We don't want to stop that from happening, because it's a scary notion that this new thing might make our whole world transform. We have to look at it in terms of there's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. And we have to identify those risks and those threats. Especially, yes, the psychological impacts of people being inundated with, this AI slop propaganda, and how that's going to distort reality, and it's going to harm people, and it can be a tool that's used to do evil against people and to ruin their lives, and to depress them to the point where they want to go to suicide. These are things that have actually happened. Chatbots have led people to kill themselves. This is not okay. This is not the proper intended use of this technology. So when we look at this and, like, what can we do within reason to take a just, fair, reasonable, right approach to this that is based in mutual interests, mutual benefits, mutual securities, mutual respects, helps to, keep things within a moderating equilibrium so things don't get out of hand. We put checks and balances to prevent bad actors from nefarious intent from using this to do harm, cause harm, or be bad. And find a way to make sure that we can democratize this technology as much as possible so that it helps everybody level up their lives. So I wanted to thank Senator Bernie Sanders for his brilliant might of great care, for his initiative to take responsibility to approach this dire circumstance that we are in, and this real world dilemma, this social, this economic, this political, and world paradigm dilemma that we're in, of how do we reconcile the need for this technology to be able to advance, but also a need to make sure that it does not leave us behind, or keep us behind, or harm us in the process of its development. Thank you for doing that, and for the thought-provoking conversation that you had, bringing the voices of, these quotes from these brilliant minds who are working towards these things, but have, for all their intelligence and all their capabilities, have not been able to find a way to solve for and reconcile the destruction, the disruption, and the disorientation that their technology has now created in our world, And so somebody else who does care enough to see how that all relates and how it can all come together is really the type of person that needs to be having those conversations. To speak to them is like, technologists, man, you have incredible capacity for good. We just want to make sure we keep you in line with what you're doing is really serving for the, advancement and betterment of humankind. Because I don't believe for a second, other than maybe a few greedy people that are like, ooh, so much money going into AI right now, like, here's an opportunity to exploit, create a better mousetrap to be able to, draw in money, whatever. I don't think that money is the moderating influence behind their decision making. It is more like, wow, This thing has so much potential. Like, there's amazing, cool things that you can do with this. And man, let's solve for these real world problems. Let's, like, what really frustrates me? That I have to do this tedium task. It's exhausting. I don't want to do it anymore. Innovate it out. I love that part of innovators. I love it. I look at everything as like, inefficient systems. I delight in my mind to be like, it's inefficient systems, and if you did X, Y, and Z, you innovate that out. Problem solved. Move on to the next problem, And so I respect that. I appreciate it. I value it. I want to champion for that. But not a lot of these people have conscience or care. And many of them have been, so economically isolated from the rest of the world that they don't understand that there are consequences to their decision making and their advancements, and they're causing real world harm to so many people. And while they may be in their little insulated pockets of thriving, and it doesn't really matter to them whether, somebody's living on the streets because they can no longer afford rent in the neighborhoods to where data centers have been brought and have raised the cost of living to be so unaffordable that, people can't get along and they have nowhere else to go. This is the only place they've ever known their entire lives. I understand you're so far removed from that displacement that you created. But it's not a care, it's not a concern. It has nothing to do with your bottom line. Well, we need to make it about your bottom line now. Your bottom line is not about, throwing charity at people who are now suffering, the consequences of your advancement. No. Sovereign support, direct action. We're working together in mutual interest. We're getting this done together because we advance much farther when we go together. And with that, I'm grateful for your valuable time, attention, and consideration about this very fascinating topic that I obviously have a lot of passionate care and concern about. And again, thank you, Bernie Sanders, for your prompt pitched out there. With that, again, thank you for your valuable time, attention, consideration. Till next time, be well.